If you're traveling abroad and you're confused about how to use your phone without getting hit with an insane bill, you're definitely not alone. This is one of those travel topics that always feels more complicated than it really should be, especially if you don't travel internationally all the time. A lot of people either overpay because they really just don't want to deal with the hassle, or they just turn their phone off completely and then they struggle the entire time on their trip. I've been on both sides of that, and after traveling internationally for years now and trying pretty much every option, I wanted to update a video I had made a few years ago about how to use your phone abroad and how it actually works in 2026. Things have changed a lot over the past few years, especially with eSIMs becoming more common, and most travelers don't really realize how easy it is now. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through everything, step by step, explain all your options to you, and help you decide what makes the most sense for your trip. This is aimed at casual travelers, not really tech experts. So if you're just trying to use Google Maps, message people back home, and upload a few photos without stress, this video is for you. So let's start with why using your phone abroad feels so confusing. And the reason using your phone abroad feels overwhelming is because phone carriers do an absolutely terrible job of explaining how it works. Most people hear the word roaming and they immediately panic because they've either heard horror stories about massive bills or they've experienced it themselves. Roaming basically just means that your phone is connecting to networks in other countries, but what matters is whether your carrier has an agreement in place and whether you're being charged for it. The problem is that those details are usually buried deep in carrier websites, and they're different depending on where you're going. On top of that, people are using their phones more than ever while traveling. We rely on maps, rideshare apps, translation apps, restaurant reviews, and messaging constantly, so going without data isn't really realistic anymore. At the same time, nobody wants to come home to a surprise bill, of course. That's why understanding your options ahead of time makes a huge difference. Once you understand how roaming works and what alternatives exist, the anxiety disappears completely. You stop worrying about turning your phone on when you land, and instead your phone just becomes a tool that helps you run your trip smoothly. So step one, what to check on your phone before you travel. Before you even think about SIM cards, eSIMs, roaming plans, the most important thing you need to do is check your actual phone. This step gets skipped all the time, and it's usually why people run into issues later. First, you need to know whether your phone is unlocked. An unlocked phone means it can connect to different carriers, which is essential if you plan on using any other plan other than your home carrier's roaming plan. Most phones that are fully paid off should be unlocked, so again, just double check. But if you are on a payment plan, it's probably locked still. So this is something that you usually check in your phone settings or by contacting your carrier. Next, you want to see if your phone supports eSIMs or if it has a physical SIM slot. Most newer phones do, but older models may not. Knowing this ahead of time will help you avoid last-minute stress at the airport. And finally, it's important to be honest with yourself about how much data you actually use. If you're constantly on social media or uploading videos, then obviously you're going to need more data than someone who just kind of checks maps and wants to message people back. Taking 5 minutes to kind of figure out all of this stuff before your trip is going to help make everything else so much easier. So now let's take a look at your 3 main options for using your phone abroad. Once you know what your phone can handle, it really comes down to 3 main options. The first is an international roaming plan through your current carrier here in the States. This is usually the easiest because you don't have to change anything. You don't have to do anything at all. You just land, turn on your phone, and it works. The downside is that convenience often comes at a pretty steep price, and these plans are so expensive, and sometimes the data speeds aren't really that great. I'm pretty sure AT&T is free for anywhere in Latin America if you're on their unlimited premium plan, but it's $10 a day for everywhere else in the world. So if you're gone for a 2-week trip in Europe, now you're spending an extra $140 onto your existing phone plan, which is just insane. And if you have T-Mobile, you are lucky because it's the only American phone carrier that has free worldwide data. So technically you don't have to do anything extra, and you won't be charged anything extra to use your phone anywhere in the world. But the downside is that it's only 3G, so it's really only good for messaging people back, and sometimes you can load Google Map directions. Not all the time, so don't expect to do too much with it, but it is great that it already exists and will get you the basics for free. The second option is buying a local SIM card when you arrive. This has been popular for years, and it's what I used to do when I first started traveling because it's by far the cheapest way to get data, especially if you're staying in one country for a while. The trade-off is that you have to physically swap SIM cards, of course. You have to deal with a new phone number, and you have to make sure that you don't lose your original SIM card. But again, when I was traveling Asia for years, every country I went to, I'd pay like $5, put in the SIM card, I'd get unlimited data for the whole month I was traveling around there. So it was super cheap, and I didn't mind that my phone number was constantly changing. But the main issue with this now, which is unfortunate because like I said, it is by far the cheapest option, is that all the new phones don't have physical SIM slots anymore. So if you're an iPhone user, Apple stopped having physical SIM card slots with the iPhone 14 back in 2022. So it's physically impossible to buy a local SIM and put it in your phone to use. But that leads me to the third option, which has become the most popular for many travelers, using an eSIM. So an eSIM lets you download a data plan digitally without swapping anything out. You can usually set it up before you even leave home, and when you land, you can just connect to it instantly. This will mean that you have a different phone number on your trip, of course, but now most phones do have dual SIM capabilities. So when you are connected to Wi-Fi, even though that American SIM is off, you can still send your iMessages to your American number and you can respond, you'll be fine. But just as soon as you leave the Wi-Fi, your international eSIM will kick on, so you don't get charged for roaming. So each option works, but the best one depends on your trip length, budget, and how much effort you want to put in. Adding to your current American phone plan is the most convenient, but by far the most expensive. Totally not worth it in my personal opinion. The local SIM is the cheapest, but most inconvenient and might not even be possible for you anymore, depending if you have a new phone or not. And the eSIM is the best compromise in my opinion. It's still significantly cheaper than adding to your roaming plan to your existing phone, and almost just as convenient because you can kind of have it all set up before you even take off on your trip. Which kind of leads me to my next point, what I personally recommend for casual travelers. If you're someone who travels occasionally and just wants things to work without thinking about it too much, I almost always recommend using an eSIM. It's the best balance between convenience, reliability, and price. Being able to set everything up before you leave home is a huge advantage. You can land, turn off airplane mode, and immediately use maps, message your family, and figure out transportation without relying on airport Wi-Fi. For people who get anxious about travel logistics, this alone is worth it, in my opinion. That said, if you're traveling for an extended period or living abroad, a local SIM might make more sense financially, but again, make sure your phone is old enough that it actually still has a physical SIM card slot. Roaming plans are fine for a very, very short trip or an emergency, but for most people, they're just not the best long-term solution because they're just so expensive. What matters most is choosing the option that fits your trip, not just copying what someone else does. So once you know your priorities, the decision becomes pretty straightforward and you can travel without constantly worrying about your phone. One thing I do want to mention, because I do get asked this all the time, is what I personally use and what I recommend when it comes to eSIM specifically. The best and easiest eSIM option I've used, especially for travel, is Airalo. I've used Airalo on multiple trips now, and what I love about it is how simple it is. You can download the app, choose the country or region that you're traveling to. I usually just pick the global option so I can use it when I'm bouncing around. Then you pick how much data you want and install the eSIM digitally before you even leave home. Once you land, you just turn it on and you're connected. There's no physical SIM card to swap, no store visits, no waiting around on airport Wi-Fi trying to figure things out. It's especially great if you're traveling for a short trip or just kind of hopping between countries and you just want data for maps, messaging, and just everyday use. If you're interested in an easy eSIM to download, you can check out the description for my link to Airalo and get $3 off your first eSIM, which is a nice little bonus. The other eSIM option I want to mention is Leica Mobile, which I've actually been using my entire time living here in the UK for over 2.5 years now. Depending on the plan that you're on, Leica Mobile offers amazing value, and the plan that I currently use is only £10 a month for unlimited data, unlimited text, unlimited calling all across Europe. So that means every time I travel anywhere in Europe, like I leave the UK, I go to mainland Europe, I don't have to get a new eSIM card, change settings, or even think about data at all. I just land and my phone works exactly the same way as it does back home. So if you're traveling in the UK or traveling around Europe frequently, this kind of setup can be a game changer because it completely removes the hassle of switching eSIMs every time you cross a border, except Switzerland, who always does their own thing, but we won't get into that right now. So now that you know your options, let's talk about important settings you should change before you actually go on your trip. Even with the right setup, there are a few phone settings that can make or break your experience. One of the most important things you can do is make sure data roaming is turned off on your American SIM so you don't accidentally use it. If you're using an eSIM, you want to make sure it's selected as your primary data line. It's also a good idea to download offline maps before your trip, especially for cities you know that you're going to be navigating on foot. Wi-Fi calling and texting is also going to be key, so if you don't have an iPhone iPhone to use iMessage and FaceTime, then you really should download WhatsApp so that way you can do this even though you don't have an iPhone. These small adjustments don't take long, but they can save you money and frustration. A lot of people skip this step and then wonder why things aren't working properly once they land. Taking a few minutes just to double check everything, right before you leave, it just makes the entire trip smoother. So using your phone abroad really doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Once you understand how roaming works and what your alternatives are, it just becomes another part of travel planning. The key is deciding what level of convenience you want and setting everything up ahead of time so that way you're not kind of scrambling when you land. Whether you choose an eSIM, a local SIM, or a roaming plan, the most important thing is that you feel confident using your phone instead of feeling stressed about it. If this video helped clear things up, make sure to like it and subscribe for more travel tips, and let me know in the comments where you're traveling to next. I'm always happy to help answer questions and share what's worked for me. Now let's take a look at the 10 insanely underrated European destinations you should travel to this year.